It looks more and more like voters will have a rematch on their hands when the presidential election arrives in a year. Can there be a viable third option to Presidents Biden and Trump? We're looking at the No Labels political party with one of their executives and the conditions that may change things this time around. Political analyst Rick Mullaney joins me. Plus, City Council now making moves to step up against homelessness and in favor of affordable housing. District 5's Joe Carlucci leads the new special committee. Those topics and more on This Week in Jacksonville. Glad you're with us today. Republican candidates for president have had 3 debates already. They got another scheduled in the coming month. Any Democratic candidates face an uphill climb against the incumbent. And both groups have critics who feel that their political party just doesn't represent them anymore. We're diving into presidential politics this morning, joined by News4Jax political analyst Rick Mullaney and Joe Cunningham of No Labels, appearing by Zoom from Charleston, South Carolina. And Joe's a former U.S. representative. So, Congressman, let's start with an explanation about No Labels, born back in 2009, but I would say with a much higher profile right now than I remember in this last decade plus.
That's right, Ken. We've been around a dozen years or so, and really our work has mainly been focused on over in the House and the Senate. We helped create the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a group of half Dems, half Republicans that I was a part of that meet every week to talk about our problems and try to find bipartisan solutions. We've grown that, but about a year and a half ago, we started to expand our gaze and look at the presidential election, start to ask questions like, what happens if it's a rematch between Trump and Biden? And to no one's surprise, the numbers that we saw back then reflect the same numbers we're seeing today. And the takeaway is that most Americans don't want to see this sequel, and they are interested and have an appetite for a bipartisan ticket. So that's what we're looking to put together, and we've been working to secure ballot access on all 50 states plus Washington, D.C., and we have a strategy to get on all 50 states plus D.C. and hopefully select a ticket sometime in the spring of next year.
And so, Joe Cunningham, I want to bring Rick into our conversation here. I know there's lots you want to hear from No Labels and from Joe Cunningham in particular.
Well, Joe, obviously the big topic is presidential politics and what's going to happen in 2024. But before we get there, you mentioned that over the last 12 years, No Labels has been very active, both in the House and in the Senate. And are there specific candidates and specific issues over the last 12 years that No Labels has been a part of as it builds momentum towards what may happen next spring?
Yeah, of course. Through the Problem Solvers Caucus, we've been supporting those members, those moderates, center left, center right. Obviously, we are very active in that bipartisan infrastructure deal through the Problem Solvers Caucus. Yeah. And as you know now, Rick, there's a razor thin majority in both chambers. And so a caucus like this, and it's the only bipartisan caucus like that up in Washington, D.C., has tremendous effect. But national debt negotiations or debt ceiling, these are all immigration. These are all things that we're concerned about, like most of America, and we're working to achieve bipartisan solutions for them.
So one of the things I saw preparing for our interview, some research from No Labels saying American voters want another option. Maybe explain this, because the bottom line is No Labels is saying, hey, 58% of voters want another option.
Right. And, we're in a very unique time in our country's history where I think it's like 60-something% don't want to see President Trump on the ticket. 70% say the same about Biden. We've just never seen this in modern history. And so that's why a pathway exists for an alternative. And I get, the reluctance to view third parties or an alternative ticket because of our nation's history. And Rick can speak fully to that. However, this time right now where half of Americans are identifying as independents and majority of Americans don't like either candidates that are going to be on the ballot, that presents an opening. And one key takeaway here is in a competitive three-way race, it's plurality wins in every single state except 2 states. So if you win the plurality, the biggest slice of the pie in a competitive three-way race, you can win all electoral votes in a state like Florida or South Carolina by receiving as little as 35, even 34% of the vote.
Joe, I want to ask you a very specific question because I do think it's a unique time now, and the partisan divide is really the worst of my lifetime. Having said that, have you done polling, not just a generic ballot, but have you done polling with the name of a specific individual? And you don't have to reveal it today, although we welcome you to do that. Have you done specific polling with a specific name that actually shows that someone else could beat Donald Trump and Joe Biden, who are obviously the likely nominees from their parties? Does that pathway truly exist for a specific name?
Well, I'll say that our time frame allows us to nominate a candidate probably next spring. And so the specific named answer to your question is something we'll probably be doing over the next few months. We have done polling to find out, which poll is better between a Republican and a Democrat on top. And probably to not make people surprised, a Republican on top actually fared a bit better. And that's probably because, maybe there are more anti-Trump Republicans than there are anti-Biden Democrats. But we're firming up the process of how we were going to select a candidate, and so we're trying to put the, make sure the horse is in front of the cart there before we start polling individual names that may or may not offer themselves up for this ballot.
Well, and I'll get specific here. I'll give you a specific name. So West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. He's saying that he's not going to run for re-election. And then in a message that he posted on social media last week, Manchin says he'll travel the country to see if there is an interest in, and here's his quote, creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together. So that sounds a lot like what I'm hearing from No Labels. Is Joe Manchin somebody who's going to align or already aligned with the No Labels effort?
Ken, I had a feeling his name might come up in this instance. Nobody's surprised. Look, Joe Manchin, great leader. He's been around this organization, honorary co-chair for No Labels. He's been operating in this realm, so it's no surprise that his name would be brought up by others. The truth is, though, I'm not being coy. Nobody has an inside lane here. This is not a coronation by No Labels on one particular person. We're keeping an open mind on this selection process. But look, it's going to have to be somebody who is bipartisan and who can work with the other party to get things done.
All right. I think there's much more to discuss with Rick Mullaney and former Congressman Joe Cunningham, No Labels National Director, and then the founder of Jacksonville University's Public Policy Institute. Both staying with us. You stay with us, too, here on This Week in Jacksonville. We'll be right back.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Rick Mullaney is with us, also former Congressman Joe Cunningham, now the National Director for No Labels, the political party. And let's in this segment get into some of the other issues we'll see in the coming year's presidential campaign. But Rick, I know you were talking about, gosh, there's some bipartisan criticism of or objection to No Labels.
Yeah, there is, Joe, and I wanted to follow up a little bit. I certainly understand your position that this time is unique, and the polling certainly suggests that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both very unpopular, and there's a desire for an alternative. But certainly it defies history to suggest that a third party can win. And you have gotten a little bit of, well, not a little bit, some pretty strong pushback, particularly from the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi and others, who believe that this really helps Donald Trump win. You've also gotten criticism from Chris Christie, who suggests that maybe don't know what the consequences of this will be. So my question, Joe, is how do you address those critics who suggest that this really is a spoiler's role and that you will tilt this one way or the other towards Donald Trump or towards Joe Biden?
Yeah, Rick, I mean, as we know, if you want to avoid criticism, just don't ever attempt to do anything significant. That's a good way to do it. And so we're engaging in politics at the highest level in our country. And so that's going to draw some attention. The truth is, this is the United States of America, and we have a constitutional right to get on the ballot. And our founding fathers didn't mention political parties in the writing of the Constitution. So for anyone to suggest they have a right to tell us what to do and what we can't do, simply just butts up against the intention of our founding fathers. And so I also find it interesting that a lot of people have opinions as to what impact this may have on the election when we haven't even decided to name a ticket yet, and we haven't even put names on. And as you point out earlier, it's a great point, when you asked whether or not we've polled specific names, because as I'm sure we can both agree, how this will impact will depend upon what names are actually on the ballot and who's on top of the ballot. And I think to suggest that a pundit or someone or a politician knows what type of effect this is going to have without knowing who's going to be on the ballot, personally, I think that's intellectually dishonest. It seems to me that, if you had a Democrat on top, it'd probably be more likely to draw from Democrats. And if you had a Republican, it'd be more likely to draw from Republicans. But we'll make that decision next spring. And I'll also note too, Rick, because we do hear this, but we also heard it from the same groups who said that Robert Kennedy would be a spoiler and would help Trump. They said that for weeks, that if he ran as an independent, that's the impact that he would have. And they said it with the same level of certainty that they're saying this about no labels. And what did the polls suggest when the recent rounds came out? They suggest that Kennedy would draw more from Donald Trump than Joe Biden. So again, these are allegations coming from oftentimes the same people who have been wrong before. And again, I think everybody should just probably keep their powder dry, wait for us to nominate a ticket, and we'll see what type of impact it has. But the truth is, we're stepping in to fill a very important need for America right now that is begging for other options. They're begging for other choices. And the political establishment is not giving people the choices that they want. And so we're going to offer one up to fill that void.
I'm interested from both of you, really, but what's going to be the impact of these various Donald Trump trials, and particularly in the context of will it impact if he's gets the nomination, gets into the general election, or what have you? And Rick, I'll start with you on that topic.
Well, actually, I'd like to use that as a question for Joe. Joe, his first trial is really set for March. That's in federal court. I don't believe the New York one is likely to go in March, and the one in Florida is set for May. March, but it's also the time of Super Tuesday, which suggests to me that Donald Trump is likely to have a pretty good hold on the Republican nomination even before a jury comes back. So in March, my question to you is, if it appears that it's Donald Trump in March, because I know you're making a decision this spring, maybe March or April, and if it appears it's Joe Biden, and Lyndon Johnson announced he wasn't running as late as March. I think March is about the deadline for Joe Biden too. If they're on track, are you moving forward with that ticket if come March it's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump?
We are. I mean, barring any significant change in circumstances, America has spoken very loudly and clearly that they do not want to see this rematch. And as you point out, Super Tuesday in March, that's the reason that we're waiting until then, because traditionally speaking, we know who the nominees are right after Super Tuesday. Again, barring some significant event. So that's why we're waiting to that particular period. And, Kent, to your question, I don't know. I don't see these trials impacting Trump's ability to make it to the primary, at least. And, I live in South Carolina, and I know, you're part of Florida down there is fairly conservative as well. If these polls suggest that Trump is either tied or possibly leading by a few, in my own personal experience, oftentimes Trump's lead is even bigger than that because he oftentimes runs ahead of the polls.
So before we run out of time, we've got about 2 minutes left here, but I did want to go back to the Unity ticket. I see some conversation here and on the webpage there for No Labels, the 2024. What is that? And maybe explain what that effort is about for No Labels and the voting populace out there.
So the Unity ticket is something No Labels is putting together, a bipartisan ticket, Republican, Democrat, or Democrat independent, to offer that ballot line if Americans want another choice and if there is a pathway to victory. And we've done a tremendous amount of polling and modeling to suggest that there is a pathway to victory. And there's extensive polling to show that Americans are not happy with their choices. So we're securing the ballot. The ballot line is the Unity ticket that we will offer up next spring, unless these conditions significantly change, so that Americans have another voice, another choice.
All right, Joe Cunningham, I appreciate it very much. What's that?
One more thing. Go nolabels.org. You can learn more.
Okay, sure. We've learned more just by getting to visit with you for a little while. Joe Cunningham, National Director, No Labels. Rick Mullaney, our political analyst, thank you very much. All right, so stay with us, and we're getting hyper-local when we come back. Jacksonville's District 5 Representative Joe Carlucci, next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Jacksonville City Councilman Joe Carlucci joining us today. A few topics coming to mind, and one of them concerns a special committee that you're chairing and just getting some of the work underway there. How are you approaching the issue of homelessness and affordable housing?
So it's a great question, and luckily there's been a ton of work that's already been done. There's been about 4 or 5 different studies. So now my task is going to be to take this committee and start implementing legislation, implementing the ideas that have already been set, because that's what we don't want to just see another study done, sit on the shelf. We want to start implementing these ideas that experts have already put forth. So that's the goal.
If it's about taking action, what do you have in mind for the action to be?
Right. So the action, one of the actions would be affordable housing. One of the recommendations was gap funding. A lot of these deals don't work because of the rents on affordable housing is so low. So there has to be gap funding, which means it might be $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. That kind of bridges the gap for these development deals to work. So one of the ideas was, let's do that on a low interest loan basis and then have the interest from that loan go into the homeless trust fund. And then that homeless trust fund will be more of diversion dollars, which keeps people off the streets. So it's kind of, not adding any more additional.
And is that idea to prevent folks from being unhoused and getting into that space?
Right, yeah, it's kind of just one facet of homelessness, right, is we don't want the numbers to keep rising and rising. We want to, at minimum, maintain where they are and then start, really doing a wraparound services for those folks who are already on the streets.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about is, so got some video here, but hundreds of small local business owners in Jacksonville are gathering to learn about construction opportunities with the Shipyards project. Back in 2021, City Council voted to bring a riverfront development to the downtown area, and Jaguars owner Shad Khan is involved in this. Plans for 4 Seasons Hotel residents. What do you think about this? Because again, it's, hey, we want small businesses to come in and get the opportunities for this development.
No, I mean, I think it speaks volumes just for Shad Khan's commitment to this city, and we want our small businesses to thrive. So, and small business, just so the folks listening know, it's $12 million or less in gross receipts. And you can participate in the JSEB, Jacksonville Small Emerging Businesses Program. So I would encourage any of them to, start looking into that if they're 12 million or less in gross receipts and resident of Duval County.
That's separate from, well, I guess there's a combination between this is a city project, but it's the Jaguars or the development, the Iguana Investments kind of thing.
Yeah, so they reached out to, I think it's PCL, to be the master developer for this. And then with their incentive dollars that they got, they have to hire a certain amount of local, contractors, electricians, and plumbers, and all of that. So PCL is, the main GC on the project, and then all the local firms are going to be basically hired by PCL.
Let's talk about another project here. And Councilman, earlier this month, you posted on social media, here's the quote, "Great progress underway with River's Edge community." So let's talk about that. River's Edge, I mean, it's really close to where our TV station is. Here's some of the images that they're saying about or displaying about this. But this would be really cool. But this is the same property that for a decade or more, we've said, oh, that's going to develop.
That's right.
Someday.
Right, no, and someday is here. Yes, they're laying the flat groundwork, the horizontal work. It's being done right now. It's all passed through City Council, and we are going to see it start coming out of the ground. Toll Brothers is one of the home builders that's there that are going to build townhouses there, and this is a standout flagship project, not just for Jacksonville, but for District 5 and the South Bank, because it has been vacant and empty for so long and fenced off. So our residents and in District 5 and throughout the city are going to finally be able to have restaurants and shops and parks right there on the river, and it's going to change just your weekend plans, so to speak. So I'm excited about that.
And there's been some other projects in District 5 and San Marco and South Bank and whatever.
Correct, yeah. So one of the other ones is the Related Group out of Miami. They are kind of the other bookend for the South Bank Riverwalk. So we have them near Friendship Fountain, doing multifamily with a restaurant there, redoing the marina. And then on the other bookend is that River's Edge development that you were talking about. So we're going to have amazing connectivity. You walk the whole thing and spend, hours out there going to get food and drinks and ice cream with your family and friends. So You know, we've talked about activating the river for a long time, and we're finally getting there with these 2 projects, and I'm just pumped about it.
Yeah, final 30 seconds or so. Other things off the river even that have been happening in your district?
You know, the small things matter. I'll just say that. The small things matter for people, whether it's redoing trash cans or redoing landscaping or putting in sidewalks. We've done all of those little small things, and I appreciate those small things as much as I do the big projects too. So, yeah.
As somebody who lives in that district, or not lives, works in that district, boy, there have been some great things, including the Publix goes in. And
another decade-long,
yes,
or 2 decade-long thing.
And finally, it arrived.
You're right.
You arrived today ready to talk about that. Thank you so much, City Councilman Joe Carlucci.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. Chris Hand is joining us next week. That's when we bring you our Hand on Government episode. Lots to talk about there. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17. Then you'll find us online at news4jax.com or streaming on News4Jax Plus. And before we go, I want to make sure that you know that we've launched a brand new version of This Week in Jacksonville. It's called Business Edition. It's a streaming podcast that focuses on economic development in the River City and our region. And this week's episode looks at AI. We're calling it The Promise and Peril. You can find new episodes every Thursday at 9 a.m. Then you're going to find it right now on News4Jax Plus under the channel This Week in Jacksonville. You also find This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. That's available wherever you find your podcast.
See why every day more people are choosing News4Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.